Welcome to this podcast episode in which we'll be looking at the topic of meaningful business. My name is Dr. Alex Altersky from the School of Business and Society at the University of York. A warm welcome to my guest, Pete Watkins, co-founder of the Speak Carbon Collective. Hi, Pete.
Hi, thanks very much for having me along.
No problem. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the idea of meaningful business and what it means to you, please?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to come and talk about meaningful business. I started quite young with an idea of being an entrepreneur. Didn't actually know what it was when I was around 10, and thinking about walking dogs or painting light bulbs and all the different ideas. But the idea fascinated me. Academically at the time, as a few people are into that, it didn't really click with me. It didn't come till later. But this idea that I could create things and that I could go and do things was the meaning to me. I did actually go to university. I wanted to extend the time that I had being sociable, really, rather than the academic part. But I did a business degree, thinking that that would give me some of the tools I needed. And very quickly in my early 20s, I started a business selling coffee. There's a bit more of a story to it than just selling coffee, how I got there. But ultimately, that's what I did. A team of around 10 of us, and absolutely loved the idea of being able to bring people together over a cup of coffee. We were called Cwtch, which is Welsh for a little cuddle. So that was the idea that we brought to people, this idea that you had this moment in the day where you could switch everything else off. And that was the team that worked with me. That was myself and the customers that we had in South London. And I enjoyed that for about 12 years. It was hard work. There's probably quite a lot of different meanings in terms of what we did. I used sustainable packaging. We looked at trying to turn the business into a cooperative to give it a different perspective for the people that work there and potentially the people that had coffee with us. And then a little bit later, I moved up to York 2018, packed that in and looked for a new challenge. And at the same time, I did sign up for a master's in sustainability and behaviour change, because that really did mean something to me, this idea of sustainability. And at the same time, I think I was influenced by a report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change into global warming around 2018. I didn't know it then. It's not until I've reflected that I thought, that must have been what got me into this, and started to work around ideas around food recovery in York, so finding waste food from supermarkets and repurposing it. And all of that was great until the pandemic hit in 2020, and I needed to pivot. So I found a online training course called Carbon Literacy, a day's worth of learning, which tries to get people to understand and engage with the climate emergency, and importantly motivate them or give them the capability to be able to go and take action at the end of the course. So I did that, and I sort of built my own courses, family, friends. It was lockdown. You could get a Zoom room full next to no time. But found that there were a few businesses that were interested in that idea, the meaning to me of this climate crisis, 2 children, looking at the future, pretty worried about what I was studying in my master's and what I was learning as well. I found some organisations that were also interested in doing this, and was able to sell that course, which you need to be able to do to run a business. So, started to do that. We've been doing that as a community interest company, so a company that doesn't formally make profit, but does something positive in respect to a prescribed community, if you like. So, we've been doing that for around 4 years with various businesses, lots of local authorities, some universities, including the University of York, University of Westminster, we've been all about. And more recently, over the last couple of years, some quite big law firms have come on board, some manufacturing companies, in fact, all sorts of different organisations that want to know a little bit more about the climate crisis.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much. So Speak Carbon Collective, why did you decide to do it as a community interest company then?
So we were looking at Uh, what we wanted to do. I mean, the meaning for us of taking this business forward, and it's pretty easy, I think, if you're in the climate space to find that pretty quickly. You're genuinely terrified by what you've read or what you've studied. There's a lot of academics in this field to what is coming up, what our future holds, and it doesn't look particularly positive if you look at it from particular angles. So this business is to try and turn that on its head a little bit and say, do you know what, we can do something. So the idea was we had that quite fundamental meaning to what we do. The community interest element meant that we were signalling that we were a bit different as an organisation, because we do actually believe that fundamentally business needs to change. The businesses that we work with, we fundamentally believe need to change because of the climate crisis and because of what we know. And we need to respect that all businesses aren't in that position and aren't necessarily of that thinking, particularly businesses that we work with, some of the larger ones. But we need to demonstrate that we're slightly different. And the community interest part, the non-profit part, gave us that story to be able to tell. We are a little bit different, but not completely different. We didn't want to go to become a charity. We wanted to be able to have some of the mechanics of a business. And also, the community interest company allowed us to get funding streams, so different types of revenue from business to business sales, which was our main business model.
I mean, I can see it's almost an obvious question of how what you're doing links to meaningful business, because it's linked to the climate, it's linked to sustainability. But you do seem to be engaging with other businesses, and obviously you're providing this training to them. What are the challenges, do you think, for these other businesses?
There are many challenges for businesses that we go into. Quite often our door is opened by a sustainability professional within that business, or if it's a larger firm, you might have an ESG department and sustainability professionals in that, and they generally quite passionate about what we are going to teach and what we want to deliver to the business. However, the story goes businesses grow, and businesses grow profit. And that is sometimes in conflict with what we want to talk about, which is how we reduce some of the energy that the business might put forward. And in fact, potentially, it's very difficult for some businesses to move forward and grow at all if you're talking about travel and transport, or you're working with a travel agency and other businesses as well. So we find that businesses are often set up in a particular way, and growth is a big part of that. It's always a big part of that. And to talk about reducing things and not doing things is very problematic for companies that are set up to do something very different around a growth model that is decades or centuries old, really, isn't it, in terms of what we've been telling businesses they should be doing. When I say we, I mean society, government, textbooks, universities, academics, all sorts. So we do find when we go in, there's a bit of a jar. People recognise that there's an emergency, and they recognise that something needs to be done. But some of those solutions don't quite fit with how a business is supposed to, and I'm going to do some inverted commas that people won't be able to see on the podcast, that the businesses are supposed to do. So we go in and we deliver the training, but there seems to be a role or a job that needs to be changing the story of business, changing what businesses are supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking earlier, and I think we discussed that businesses can be very risk averse, and they're very used to just continuing to do what they've always done. Have you sort of have examples of that, or what's your thinking on that?
Yeah, I think we were talking about larger businesses, weren't we? So I think that's what tends to happen. I'm not so sure that's the same for small entrepreneurial startup businesses. And a lot of those, I mean, me included, don't really think about profitability. Or we do think about money, but probably not enough, which is why quite a few of them fail. We think about all the things that we can achieve, that we want to do in terms of maybe bringing communities together, or incredible ideas that might change the world. I think as companies grow and as businesses become larger or more integrated into our economic system, there are certain pressures. Pay your tax, pay your employees. If you're in a small business, pay your mortgage. If you're in a larger business, pay your shareholders. And there are expectations around that. And I think that does mean that larger businesses do become less able to change very quickly, to adapt very, very, very sort of quickly. And what we're talking about is transformation. We're talking about adapting to a brand new set of parameters within a brand new climate. And businesses are going to have to operate very differently if we're going to avoid some of the worst things that are coming our way. And there's plenty of it that's already here. So yeah, these larger businesses, they do tend to work in a safe space, in a comfortable space, and there's some power dynamics that were within that, and lots of sort of complexities around it. So getting people on board with the science and with the academic and the theories behind it, absolutely. Getting people on board with making the changes is really quite difficult, particularly with larger businesses.
So in what ways do you think your hopes and experiences of meaningful business could be more widely shared or practiced going forward?
So, I mean, I think in terms of our Speak Carbon Collective and our sort of basic meaning around change, around doing things that are better, around integrating with our environment, more understanding what are called externalities in economics. So understanding that actually there are no externalities. We're embedded in a larger system. We could ignore it if we want, but it will get very cross with us if we don't embed ourselves with it properly. And we do struggle to take ourselves into and we call it business as usual environment or system, and make those changes because the system doesn't really want to do that. There's a story about what businesses are supposed to do that's incredibly strong. It starts very, very early. As an example, I had my coffee shop, and we had some packaging guys used to come every week, and they said, we can brand this up for you, and it will only cost you a few coffees, which was fantastic. So we gave them a few coffees, got a huge amount of work done on trust and on a sort of partnership basis, I suppose. And the coffee shop looked quite polished at the end of it, and it was a market store when we started. By the end of it, it looked very polished. And the question that people would always come over and ask me after we had that work done was, how many of these have you got? And I'd say, one. They'd look at me in a strange way. You've only got one? Well, when's the next one coming? It's always the first question people want to know. How are you going to grow this business? And I was always like, well, I'm quite happy and, to be honest, quite busy with one, and we can do everything in our community that I want to do. But I did get forced into trying lots and lots of different ventures and lots of different things to try and grow it. And it wasn't for around 10 years that I turned around and thought, this isn't really working. One's enough. We can make our change here. So this story and idea of what businesses should do, they should grow, they should employ more people, they should make profit, it is a very difficult one to get around. And most businesses I see don't start with that narrative. No. But down the line, that becomes the essential part of running the business. So ultimately, that's the part that I feel we need to change. We need to change the story about what we tell businesses and business owners, maybe at the very beginning, and also large businesses, what we want them to do, because they can grow profit, but they can also grow social value. They can also grow climate change action. They can also grow biodiversity. So there's a huge amount of other things that they could be doing if that story was different, if that narrative that we tell them is different, and that comes from
it's about how businesses thrive beyond the idea of profit, isn't it?
Yeah,
and getting that across. And
absolutely.
You're talking in one hand about big businesses, but then you're also talking about entrepreneurs and the startup scene and everything. So do you? I mean, obviously, and you yourself are an entrepreneur as well, and you've got your direct experience. Do you feel it's this meaningful business and sustainability is something that your entrepreneurs are thinking about more deeply these days? And do you think it's an important issue for them?
Absolutely. Did you say young entrepreneurs
Well,
or just new
just
entrepreneurs?
new entrepreneurs.
Yeah, new entrepreneurs. I mean, certainly young entrepreneurs, the new generation, beyond me a little bit, people coming through. This is in their DNA. This is a change that I see. That's very different from setting up a business in the early 2000s to sort of more recent times. I think people think more about social value. What can we do that's good and is positive, rather than just the money hangover that probably came from the 80s and the 90s, I guess. But yeah, I mean, certainly, I think businesses now, and particularly startups, are looking at different ways that they can contribute. I think that story and that narrative has changed somewhat for those newer businesses. And a lot of the change that you see does exist in that zone, in that entrepreneurial zone, where you can adapt more quickly to changing dynamics. And the bigger businesses, you could call them the dinosaur businesses, will have to make those adaptations, but will find it more difficult to steer a very large ship. So I do think, smaller businesses have it within their gift to make changes very quickly. And I definitely see most small businesses now, and actually that was probably always the same, but maybe it was a bit more hidden, really understand why social value and adding different elements, rather than just how quickly the Dragon's Den philosophy, how quickly can we sell this? How quickly can we monetize this? I mean, I really dislike that story. How quickly can we make change? What can we do? And actually, just on the Dragon's Den thing, I did watch an episode of it with my little boy last week for the first time in probably 5 or 6 years. And it was quite different from what it used to be some time ago. All of the businesses in there were trying to do something that seemed to be improving the world around them. There was lots of human stories in it. So maybe there is a change in the way that we're thinking that I haven't quite brought to the front.
Brilliant, thank you. So what's the plans for the future for Speak Carbon Collective then? What are your plans going forward? And obviously, if you say growth, then
yeah. I mean, so we are a collective of different people trying to get around a shared vision of the future. So we have 2 employees now. We don't really want to think about growth, but we do want to think about connection. And if you have a look at how ecosystems work, they're often not about growth, they're about connection. So there's an element of growth in that, growing those connections, but it's not as we think about it as getting bigger. It's about creating those stronger connections. So we would like to do that. We would like to connect more with individuals who want to come in and do training. We would like to connect with more companies in a meaningful way, and that might be providing services, or it might be creating an ecosystem of organisations that want to create change. Connections rather than growth is how we look at it. How can we build connections across different elements and create this collective that can create change? We're looking at we've got to pay our bills, so we are looking at working with more organisations around carbon literacy, climate change training, and what we're developing now is in human intelligence. So how do you make humans more prepared for the changes that are coming forward? So we want to do that, and we are struggling a little bit with how we make sure that we don't get swallowed up into the same system that we're trying to change, while being mindful that that system's important and it creates jobs and it creates economic activity that we rely on. So we don't really want to pull that apart, but as it's changing, we don't want to get sucked into it and forget. So a big part of our future now is how we do that. How do we make sure that we can support the change and the transformation while also paying the bills and doing the actual work that a business needs to do? So that can be a bit of a headache, but I think in terms of not being comfortable, that is what we look at. So we have a mantra, if you like. We should be uncomfortable but safe. A bit like being on a roller coaster. Hopefully not on it the whole time, but you're uncomfortable with where you're going, and we should be, because these are uncomfortable times. But you feel safe. You don't feel vulnerable, because that doesn't help anybody actually in terms of developing the things we want to do. And when we're trying to continually make ourselves uncomfortable so that we don't sort of get sucked into the business as normal narratives that we know that are out there. And that's a real challenge, but we've got a few ideas about different projects we can get involved with, different funding streams we can get involved with, which might allow us to be able to live that out.
Brilliant. Thanks, Pete, so much for your really valuable insights on meaningful business. I wish you the best of luck with all your future plans in this area, and I'll be watching with interest as to what you do.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.